What connects these dances? Mapouka in West Africa, whining in the Caribbean, and twerking in the United States. It's the hips. They share the same roots, the same code, the same ancestral rhythm that has crossed oceans, survived slavery, and adapted to every new world African people have been forced into. Welcome back to Creative Birthright. If you're new here, my name is Brienne, and I am calling us all home to our creative identity. Today's video is about the rhythm that lives in our hips, our pelvis, our creativity, the creative lineage of dance in the African diaspora, and how these movements are not just something fun to do on the weekend, but survival. By the end of this video, I hope you understand why our African ancestors carried these dances with them, and I hope you're encouraged to go out and twerk, whine, or whatever it is that gets your waistline moving. We often only think of creativity as self-expression, but in African and diasporic traditions, it is a vital part of living. Creativity connects us to our inner essence, our ancestors, and to the divine. It keeps you grounded. It brings together communities, and it's part of the building block of culture. It's how cultural traditions are preserved and created. Dance is an example of this. And dance scholar Judith Lynn Hanna reminds us that the suppression of dance in many cultures, particularly in ritualized forms, has resulted in an imbalance in those spiritual, communal, and interpersonal qualities that regulate the individual and unifies societies. And that's because dance is a lifeline embedded in our DNA and a reminder of what makes us human. This quote also reminds us that creativity is not a luxury. It is survival. And for diasporic people, creativity has always doubled as resistance, a refusal to let our cultural memory and humanity be erased. The suppression of African dance that Hannah talks about was no accident. Colonizers and enslavers knew what we know. Dance keeps us whole, so they tried to take it away. But they could not keep us from our cultural lineage. And across the diaspora and on the continent, every dance form carries within its DNA resistance. In Côte d'Ivoire, Mapouka was originally a celebratory fertility dance centered in the hips. Colonial authorities banned it for being indecent, but the people kept dancing. In Ghana, Panlogo developed in the 1960s as youth protested social restrictions. They used traditional hip-centered rhythms to challenge authority. In Yoruba traditions, Orisha dances, like those for Oshun and Shango, were outlawed under missionaries. Yet the hips, the gestures, the trance survived in Voodoo, Candomblé, and Santeria. In the Caribbean, whining at Carnival emerged from emancipation celebrations. Freed people used their hips to declare joy and sexuality as their own. In Cuba, Rumba took shape under Spanish colonialism. Though it blended African and Spanish elements, its core was defiantly African. Drums, pelvic isolations, call and response. Colonial elites criminalized it as vulgar and threatening, but Rumba thrived on patios and streets as a hidden declaration of freedom. In Haiti, voodoo dances brought spirits down through the hips and spine. Enslavers called it witchcraft. Haitians called it liberation. And those ceremonies fueled the Haitian Revolution. In the US, the ring shout preserved African ritual even when drums were banned. Enslavers feared its circle, rhythm, and trance, yet the ring shout lived on, and out of it came gospel, blues, jazz, and hip hop. And today in the US, twerking, New Orleans bounce, or voguing in Black queer ballrooms continue the tradition. Often mocked or demonized in mainstream culture, they are in fact dances of survival, claiming space, joy, and power in a world that denies it. So let's talk about why these dances survived bans, criminalization, and demonization. Simply put, because they heal. Ritual dances like Senegal's and Dupe or the North African Zar were designed to treat trauma, to rebalance the individual and the community. The hip and pelvis became sites of release, unlocking tension and trauma stored in the body. Science confirms what our ancestors knew. Dance movement therapy reduces anxiety, depression, and PTSD. Somatic research shows that trauma often lodges in the pelvis, and rhythmic movement can free it. Catherine Hazard describes African diaspora dances as rebalancing practices that ground us in rhythm and restore balance. Hi, it is future me with a quick note of correction. Her name is Katrina Hazard, Dr. Hazard to be exact, and she is a highly accomplished university professor as well as an initiated priestess in the Lukumi tradition. She is also considered to be both a leading and recognized expert in African diasporic dance forms and cultural institutions such as the juke, as well as spiritualities, particularly hoodoo. All right, back to the video. This reconfirms for me that I should always listen to my ancestors. So many times their knowledge is dismissed as pseudoscience, and then real science catches up and tells us what we already knew to be true. So no one can ever tell me that my ancestors didn't know what they were talking about. But anyways, when we whine, twerk, or rumba, we're not just dancing. We're resisting oppression's attempt to silence us. We're processing what words cannot. We're pulling down joy, healing, and balance. So at the end of a long week, don't just pour yourself a glass of wine. Wine your hips. Maybe that was a little too cliche or corny, but I thought that was funny. Anyways, this is why these dances have always been targeted. Enslavers banned drumming and circle dances in the Americas because they feared rebellion. Colonizers called African dances vulgar, savage, pagan to strip them of spiritual power. Even within Black communities, respectability politics dismissed hip-centered dances as dirty, unladylike, or hypersexual. But let's be clear, the demonization was always about control. If you strip people of their healing practices, you weaken them. If you sexualize their rituals, you deny their sacredness. If you label their joy vulgar, you suppress their power. And the suppression of dance created some imbalance in societies and in our communities, and even in us as individuals. But luckily, we still hold on to these traditions today, and nothing was ever truly lost. And I felt this personally when I took a praise and twerkship class that was led by Jasmine Walker. And I'll put a link to their page in the description box in case you want to check it out. But that was the first time I understood twerking as spiritual practice, body worship through dance. And I felt the release while dancing. But growing up in a Christian household, I was taught that these movements were sinful, shameful even. But in that class, I felt them as a prayer, as ancestral power, as resistance. And I realized something. The demonization of these dances has been a barrier to healing for so many of us in the diaspora. By calling it vulgar, society has kept us from our medicine. This is why reclaiming our creative birthright matters. Dance is not just art. It is resistance. It is survival. It is medicine. And this reveals some larger truths about creativity. Creativity is healing. Dance proves it. Creativity connects us to the divine. Dance is prayer in motion. Creativity is communal. Dance is a circle of community, call and response, shared rhythm. Every Afro-diasporic dance is a refusal to disappear, a testimony that we are still here, still moving, still healing, still free. Dance connects the contemporary with the traditional. It relieves stress. It calls down spirit. It holds our resistance. From Mapouka to whining to Rumba to twerking, our hips testify. We carry memory in motion. We carry survival in rhythm. We carry resistance in our joy. So dance more. Learn how your ancestors moved. Reclaim your creative lineage. Because when you dance, you don't just express yourself, you resist, you heal, you return to who you are. All right, that's all I have for you today. If you learned something from this video, make sure you hit that subscribe button and be sure to hit the like button on your way out. And let me know in the comments, what is your favorite song to move your hips to? I have so many, so I created a playlist that I think I'm going to call my twerk list, but be sure to check it out. It will be linked in the description box. And until next time, I hope between this video and the next video you watch, you go out, you move your hips, you release, you call down healing, and you bring forth joy. I'll see you in the next video.